Stay at home and go anywhere. That was a clever little headline that pulled me into all this. I could almost hear the marketing department getting a raise. Neural empathy hardware is what it stood for. Just an innocuous post on a harmless messaging board. The body of the text detailed a device still in its testing phases that was searching for willing participants to try out the tech. I can't find the initial post as it has been deleted, but I remember vaguely how it was structured. Are you a homebody? Is a quiet night in more appealing than subjugating yourself to the dangers of the world? Are you looking for an adventure without the cost or the risk? Then sign up as a gazer here and be connected to adventurers all over the globe, from the comfort of your own home. Are you an adrenaline junkie? Do you live your life between the trees or on top of the oceans and want people to experience all the wonders you do? Then sign up as a pioneer and allow others to view the world through your eyes. There's a big world out there, and you can help everyone see the best parts. It was one of those things I stumbled across that just screamed too good to be true at me. Even as I clicked the sign-up link, I was only asked my address. No monetary exchange was required, and I was told that I'd receive my headset in a matter of days if I was selected. Another day went by, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that I had in fact been selected. My skepticism remained until I found a small white box, lacking any label, sitting all alone on my front porch. I brought it inside and opened it to find a lightweight, sleek black device that looked fairly similar to a VR headset. Quickly I read through the instructions and slipped the headset over my eyes. With simply the press of a button, the headset sprung to life, and my once dark view shifted into a graphic of the Earth rotating in space. There was a small whirring of fans that continuously circulated air to keep my head cool. But other than that, the immersion was immediate. Noise-canceling headphones also cupped over my ears, blocking out the outside world. I zoomed into the Earth and saw a plethora of dots littered around this landscape. Each of them donated with Pioneer followed by a set of numbers. I could also see in the corner that I was designated as Gazer 6-4. Before long, I found a dot that was sitting near the coastline, and when I thought about how nice it'd be to see the ocean, my view closed in. Within the time it took me to blink, I was amazed to find I was looking out at a gorgeous crystal blue expanse of water. Pioneer 084 was just sitting within the sands and looking out at the ocean. It was incredible. You know how the mind can sometimes convince itself it's feeling certain sensations? My mind was going into overdrive with that. The view on my end was so pristine and clear that it was like as if I was really seeing it with my own eyes. The noise from the gentle winds and the shifting waves poured into my ears. I could feel the wind, cool but comforting, and I could smell the salty aroma the ocean was giving off. I was there. I had forgotten that I was wearing a headset and was all but completely convinced that I was sitting on a beach. The only thing that was anchoring me into the reality that I was sitting on my couch was my desire to see more. Within the span of 2 hours, I went stargazing with Pioneer 014, and then bike riding through the thick wilderness with Pioneer 225. Each and every dot that I decided to visit would take me somewhere new and fantastic. I've never been skydiving or cave exploring, but I felt my heart racing as I plummeted from the sky, or heard the cool dripping of water as I've explored dark caves. The implications of this technology and how flawless it operates could potentially change the world and how we interact with it. The idea of getting home from a long day at the office and being able to relax in a natural hot spring within minutes is elevating. This is, of course, if we lived in a perfect world. There's always something, though. Always a sinister implication that exists just beyond the visible veil. I discovered this when I tuned Pioneer 004. It was getting late, and I only intended to visit a few more places to see some nightlife. I saw a dot that was pretty isolated from the rest, that was in the middle of a densely wooded area. My curiosity pulled me to it like an addict. It was dark. That was to be expected given the time of day. but it was so dark that I was momentarily convinced that my headset had turned off. I was reaching up to take the headset off, taking it as a sign it was time to get some rest when I heard his voice. It was muffled like he had his hand up over his mouth, and with a small movement, I realized he was behind a tree. His face was close to the bark, so there wasn't much light to be had, but when he moved his head to peek out from behind the tree, I could see the moonlight bouncing around the forest. Even though I initially just assumed he was walking through the woods, I got the sensation in my chest that I did when I watched the more extreme pioneers. An anxious shaking, he continued moving his head from behind the trees, and out again like he was trying to catch a glimpse of something. All the while, his ragged breath was broken up by small whimpers. With the calming of his breath, he placed his hand on the tree. I could see a glossy liquid covering it. Then he stepped out from behind the tree. When the forest was in full view, I could see a massive silhouette standing in the small clearing between the trees. The moonlight landed on its body, standing nearly twice as tall as the pioneer who had just stepped in the wrong place. A branch that must have been crafted in a cliché factory broke under his foot, and the mammoth of a creature snapped its attention towards him. Bright and yellow eyes surrounded by dark brown fur was the last thing I saw of the creature before the pioneer turned and began to run. I could feel his shortness of breath as he frantically tried to navigate between the trees. All the while, there was an intrusively loud pattern of lumbering footsteps chasing behind me. The pioneer began to scream before being cut off. It was hard to make out, but the last thing I remember seeing from him was a tree approaching far faster than he could run. There was a message that apologized for the disconnection, and then I found myself staring at the graphic of the globe again. I sat there for a while trying to take in what I had seen. Ideally, it would have ended there. Like I had just taken a gulp of medicine, I needed something to wash my palate with. So I clicked on Pioneer 160. And for a while, I was in the middle of a dance club. People were just having fun. It's what I wanted. But when I thought of my previous encounter, I couldn't help but feel something was missing. So I backed out and clicked another. Nothing was out of the ordinary there, so I continued flipping through Pioneers looking for something different. I found a number of oddities throughout this method. While I would occasionally come across a group of individuals that were ghost hunting or playing with witchcraft, there was only a handful of things that stuck out to me. That gave me that heart-racing euphoria of being close to something otherworldly without being actually close to it. Like Pioneer 034, when I clicked on her, I instantly received the view of her hand lying palm down on a wooden table, with what seemed to be a spotlight shining on it. She was using a knife in her other hand to stab at the wood between her spread fingers. The speed of her stabbing was increasing when she looked up. The intense light made it difficult to see anything but black beyond it. I heard her whisper a soft plea that echoed into the vast darkness. When there was no reply, she looked back down at her hand and began to stab at it once more. I could tell by the stained color of the wood and the scrapes and the red marks along her fingers, this was a game she was losing. As I was watching her, I could feel my fingers recoil every time the knife got a little too close. Then there was Pioneer 067 through Pioneer 070. A group of 4 people that I can quickly switch between. They all sat around a busted-up poker table looking at each other, and in the middle of the table was a gun. One pioneer at a time would pick up the gun, point it at another person and pull the trigger. 4 times I heard the gun click onto an empty chamber. It took a few times switching back and forth between them to realize that they weren't alone. Each of them had someone standing behind them. Tall cloaked figures. I could only see the bottom half of their faces, but they were wearing some kind of mask. Then I heard the gun click a 5th time. The 4 pioneers sitting down had tears running down their cheeks as the gun was picked up once again. I couldn't stomach sticking around to see what happened next. Pioneer 119 was in a bright room, almost medical in appearance, if it wasn't for the woman that was bound by shackles in the corner. The pioneer watched her squirming around and messing with the metal that was around her ankles. He then called out to her. She looked up at him in response. When I could see her eyes, the pioneer pulled a gun out, and before I could react, he shot the girl 3 times square in the head. Her body went limp and blood started soaking her hair and spilling onto the white tiles underneath her. Then I watched as her body started to shake violently, and then she looked back up at the man with a furious gaze. I could see the fucking bullet hole in her head, but there she was, snarling at the man who shot her, snarling with rigid and pointed teeth. I left them there. Some of the things I saw had less to do with the world beyond ours, and more to do with the mishaps of our lives. I watched through the eyes of a woman who was frantically trying to escape from her car as it filled up with water. I could almost taste the murky water on the tip of my tongue. Then I watched a family of 5 at dinner together, but I watched from outside their dining room window. I also came across a group of people moving through a large open field. It was the dead of the night, but not a single one had a source of light on them. They were all dressed in flowing black cloaks, and whenever I caught a good look at a face, it was obscured by a mask. Their walking went on for several minutes, and while they didn't do anything, the sheer numbers of them and the silence they moved in set my nerves on edge. There was a pioneer who was operating on a patient in a room that seemed far less medical than the one I had previously seen. When he brought his knife across the patient's skin, I could see a brown liquid ooze out. He reached into the wound he created and pulled back, and within his grasp was a small clump of what looked like black hair, but the mass was moving like it was constructed of hundreds of tendrils. I wanted to stop, but I told you how the brain can convince itself that it's feeling sensations that it's not. No matter how many times I managed to click the power button and slip the headset off of my head, I would still feel the urge to put it back on again. Within hours, I would be back at it again. I'd forego sleep or eating to get another glimpse into what is going on behind closed doors. I watched Pioneer 354 sitting in front of a mirror, speaking to it seductively, all while she pressed hot iron into her body like it was nothing. The feeling of my flesh searing sent me a rush of adrenaline just like skydiving had. Pioneer 094 slowly and methodically removed his eyes. I watched the entire procedure, and when he was done, I saw his face. Everything was there, including the holes where his eyes once were. His laughter was astounding. It's all out there, a beautiful world that is twisted up and spit out by absolute absurdity. Aliens, cryptids, and ghosts. Even the darkest parts of humanity. I've seen it all. I've been through it all, and I've felt each and every bit of it. But it isn't enough. The more of it I see, the less of it that gets to me anymore. I'm becoming desensitized to the nonsense I'm witnessing. Numb to the cries for help coming from the women bound to the sacrificial altars. Numb to the bizarre creatures I observed within the confines of governmental facilities. Lucky for me, every time I backed out and watched the world spiraling around in that dark void of space, I saw a little message. It was a small box of text asking one simple question. Would you like to be a pioneer? I answered the call, and now I'm waiting for another white box to wind up on my doorstep. Then I will try my best to show people what this world really has to offer. So when this product officially launches, and you find yourself lying back on your couch, enjoy your stay with wherever you choose to be. If you want to see something incredible, come find me, Pioneer 310, and you can sit back, relax, and go anywhere.